Hi guys, welcome to Brass Bootcamp. In today's video I'm going to be going through the pieces that bridge the gap between grade 4 and grade 5 in Great Winners by Peter Lawrence. The first piece is Aria March Past. As the title suggests, it's a military march, but your articulation needs to reflect that. So all the notes you're going to be playing in this piece are going to be tongued slightly harder than you would normally do. So let's just have a look at all the theory side of the piece and talk through that so we don't hit any brick walls later on when we're playing the piece. There's nothing in the key signature, that's great, so we don't need to worry about any sharps or flats. There's a nice repeated strain that goes between the first and second line, so just make sure you observe the first and second time bars when we're playing that. There's also a DS alcoda, so when you get to the end of the second to last line, the sign is where the repeated strain is at the beginning, so make sure you do that. Just one other note, usually when you go back and do a DS or a DC, you generally don't do the repeats when you've gone back to the DS. So when we play that repeated strain, once we've gone back to the DS, we go straight to the second time ending. Then when we get to the end of bar 32, that's when we take the coda, and the coda is the last line of the piece. So another thing that this piece is sort of testing you on, technically, is your articulation and tonguing. I mentioned that it's a march, so we need to tongue everything a little bit harder than usual. Also, in a march, we need to have a nice contrast between our tongued notes and our slurred notes, and our accented notes and our non-accented notes. So if you have a look at the little introduction, which is the first couple of bars, every note is accented, so that's a really powerful opening, so you're going to be tonguing everything really nice and hard. Then when we get to our main tune, which is the first repeated strain, you've got lots of slurs, lots of staccatos, and we need a nice contrast between the two. The section in bar 33, marked cantabile, that means in a singing style, so we need to play slightly smoother, tongue slightly less hard, just so there's a contrast between the main section of the piece and that cantabile section. So in terms of dynamics, there's not that much dynamic contrast. We've got a few bars at fortissimo, which needs to be very loud. Most of the piece is forte or mezzo forte, nice and proud sounding, to reflect the military nature of the march. So I'm going to play you from the beginning, and I'll play to the end of the first time bar. I was thinking about trying to get a nice contrast between my staccatos, really nice and short, and then blowing through and making the slurs as smooth as I could, so there's a nice contrast. The next section starts in bar 17 after the second time bar, and all the same things apply, so a nice contrast, and try and observe those slight dynamic variations in this second section. So then we get to this nice cantabile section. So just a few things on this. Yes, it needs to be in a different style, but there's sort of two ways you could play this. You could just soften all your tonguing and follow the articulation that's exactly marked on the piece, or you could try and get even more of a contrast and play everything slurred and super smooth. If you're going to do that second version, slur everything and make even more of a contrast, you just need to note that if you have a look in bar 45 onwards for a few notes, there's some accented notes. You might have to trial a few things and try and ease that transition between the really smooth playing and those accented notes. Or you could want a nice step and have even more of a contrast going from really smooth to accented sort of suddenly. Likewise, when we get to the last few bars before the DS, that same thing applies. I'll give you an example of both. I will play the first half of that cantabile section exactly as it's written, so I'm going to be tonguing in all the notes that are marked, but I'm going to be tonguing everything slightly softer, so that way there'll be less contrast between the first section, but that transition between the accented notes at the end of the phrase will be slightly more subtle. So this is exactly as it's written. I'll play the second half of that cantabile section, but this time I'm going to play really, really smoothly, and you can hear the contrast between the accents at the end of the phrase. Either way is equally valid, it's just what sort of musical effect you want to create. Do you want to keep a slight march feel and then have a more subtle transition to the accents at the end of each phrase? Or do you want to have a complete change and have it really smooth and then have a step up in style for those accents at the end of the phrase? So just to finish the piece off, so I'm going to play from bar 25 and then I'm going to take the coda. So that's it for RAF March Past. Make sure your number one priority, marching style to represent the military nature of the piece. Harder tonguing throughout the whole piece, with the exception of that cantabile section. So the next piece is another march. It's the Great Escape March. I'm sure you'll all recognise this tune. It gets played in the stands of the England football games. A slight difference in this piece is how it's written down. We're in cut common time, so 2/2 time signature, or a fast 4/4. Generally when I'm playing pieces in the 2/2 time signature, if I'm playing it, I'm always counting in a fast 4. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I'm ever conducting, I will generally conduct these pieces in 2 beats, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because if you're moving your arm 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's just a little bit fast and your arm ends up getting tired and falling off by the end of a march. If you're in your head thinking it's a fast 4/4, that'll really help things. So the rest of the theory stuff, let's get that out of the way first. We're in 2 flats in our key signature, so we've got B flat and E flat all the way through the piece. Just having a scan through for any accidentals that we need to think about. There's D flats on the first line, so 1 and 2 for your high D flats. Later on in the piece, on like the 5th line, there's a few naturals that come in, so you've got E naturals and B naturals. Also in that section you've got F sharps, high F sharp, second valve. Looking down at bar 50, you've got a key signature change, so it goes into no sharps or flats, that's nice and easy. But in that last section there's some E flats to think about as well. High flat, second valve. So let's have a play of this piece and then I will again talk a little bit about it. So very similarly to our last piece, you can hear my tonguing's nice and crisp. So again, because it's a march, we're going to be tonguing everything a little bit harder than we would normally. Lots of staccato notes, same as the last piece. Also, we've got our contrast between our slurs and our tongue notes, exactly the same as the last piece as well. So one thing that this piece does sort of test you on is actually when you're not playing. So there's lots and lots of rests. So you need to make sure you're counting your rests really carefully. And remember, we're counting a fast 4/4. So if we have a look at the first repeated strain, which is where the tune starts. So you play bom, bom, the first 2 notes, and then you've got to count 3, 4, 1, and then you play the next phrase. Then you've got to count 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 6 rests. Knowing which beat of the bar you're on, you could count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But that really confuses, because there's only 4 beats in every bar. If you count to 6, knowing where you are is quite tricky. So those 6 rests at the end of the first line, it's definitely 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you know the next part you play starts on beat number 1. So I've said this quite a lot in my other videos. It's not necessarily how long a note is or how many rests you have. It's when you play after those rests. Does your next note start on beat number 1? Or does it start on beat number 3? Or does it start on beat number 4? Knowing when you come in after a long note or after a rest, that is sometimes more important to know than actually how long the note lasts for. So again, we've got that repeated strain at the beginning, first and second time bars. You'll be really familiar with those by now. The second section starts in bar 23. It's more of the same really. Nice contrast between your tongue notes and your slurred notes. Let's hear what that sounds like. The whole of that section's forte, nice proud sounds. It's a march, again representing the military, isn't it? So nice and proud, really firm tonguing, nice contrast between your tongues and slurs. So this next section's the most difficult one. It goes quite high, there's more accidentals to think about. All your tonguing and everything stays exactly the same, so tonguing nice and hard. There's less slurs to think about in this piece as well. However, when the notes are slurred, they're often lip slurs, so slurring from an E to a C. So just make sure T-E-R, nice tongue position to slur between those two notes. As I mentioned earlier, this section, watch out for your E naturals on open vowels and your F sharps on second. That section is quite high, but it is marked fortissimo, which really does help you get those high notes. So just remember, when it's going up to the highest notes in your range, blow really fast with your airstream and make sure your tongue's in a nice T position. And also, I think a lot of people find that if you tongue slightly harder as you're going higher, it helps fire those notes out as well. So when you're getting those high G's and F sharps, blowing really fast, tonguing really hard, getting your tongue nicely arched in an E position will really help you out. One final note on that section, just make sure when you get to bar 46, it's quite a jazzy rhythm that, so just make sure your rests are in exactly the right place. You play on beat number 1, beat number 4, beat number 2, beat number 4, beat number 1, 4, 2 and 4. So knowing when you play again is really important rather than how long these notes last for. So I'll just play the final section with the key signature change. It's exactly the same as the beginning. I'll take the second time bar just to save a little bit of time, but it's exactly the same tune as before, just with all our different notes because of our different key signature. So that's the first two pieces covered. They're both in exactly the same style because they're both marches. So tonguing's much harder than you would normally do. And then accented notes are really harsh with the tonguing, really hard start to the note to give that nice proud sound. And nice contrast between your slurs. So the last piece in this grade 4 to 5 section is the Star Trek theme. So just make sure you're playing the right one because there's the Star Trek theme and then there's the Star Trek The Next Generation. So it's the one at the top, Star Trek theme. This one, it's marked brightly, so it's quite a fast tempo. The tempo is in cut common time again, so we're in 2/2 that time signature. So we're going to be counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, if you're clicking 1, 2, 3, 4 on beats 1 and 3, but counting to 4, that will really help. I can't click that fast, but it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's quite a fast piece. If you have a look, there's lots of long notes, so again, counting your long notes and knowing when the next note after the long note happens is really important. Generally, it's always on beat number 1, which really helps you out. Another thing in this piece, which is sort of testing you on, is your triplet rhythm. So your crotchet triplets. If you're thinking about your Minime beats, ta 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 ta. Nice and easy. If you're thinking your 4 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, ta 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 ta. Exactly the same speed, whether you're thinking in your Minime beats or your crotchet beats. The rest of the theory stuff, we've got our B flats in our key signature. There's quite a lot of extra accidentals in this piece, so just watch out for all those. E flats, accidentals, and they carry through the bars and they carry through the ties, so just watch out for those. The second line we introduce some F sharps, A flats, which are 2 and 3, and D flats, which are 1 and 2. F sharps, of course, are second valve. The third line we've got some low D flats, which are all 3 valves, and that's pretty much it. Rhythm is quite repetitive, but just getting your crotchet triplets in the right place is really nice and important. So if you're thinking, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, ta 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 ta. again, the phrases have pretty much the same rhythm throughout the whole piece, it's just the notes change, and it's testing you out reading those accidentals. Just a little exercise to help you out with those triplet rhythms. Again, using your trusty metronome. So find out your speed. So mine's got a little tap function where I can just tap it and it tells me what speed it is. That's about minim equals 80. So if I set my metronome minim equals 80, and then remember I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's really useful just to go through all the rhythms or all the note durations that appear in the piece. So I need to do some crotchets, I need to do some minims, I need to do some semi-breves, and I need to do some triplet crotchets. So if I can do all of those rhythms in time with the metronome, then not only do you know how fast those are, but you know how fast they feel. I think that's quite an important thing, because sometimes you know how fast they go, but certain rhythms in certain tempos just feel a certain way, and knowing how the rhythms feel to play stops you rushing or dragging those rhythms when you play them in the context of the piece. So this is 80 minims. I'm just going to play through some of these rhythms. I'll use the note G, nice middle note. So I'll start with minims. And then I'll move to crotchets. And I'll do some semi-breves. And then some triplet crotchets. So when I'm doing those triplet crotchets, I'm after the first of each triplet. The first one lands on beat number 1, and then the next group lands on beat number 3. So it's 1 da da, 3 da da, 1 da da, 3 da da. So the next thing you can do is, instead of doing minims, you can double that, so the metronome is clicking on a crotchet. So let's go double 80, which is 160. So I'll start with minims again. Then crotchets. And then some semi-breves. And then triplet crotchets. So if you're happy playing all of those rhythms, then when you come to play the piece and you know exactly how fast they are, not only how fast they sound but how fast they feel, then it's going to really help you play the piece. So one last rhythm I would advise practicing this piece, that happens quite a few times, is 2 crotchets followed by 3 triplets. So I'll leave it on crotchets, so that rhythm is going to go like this. So basically that was the rhythm in bar 2 of the piece, 2 crotchets followed by 3 triplets. And again, making sure beat number 1 lines up perfectly, and beat number 3, that's when you start your triplets nicely on the beat. So one last note for this piece is, I actually slurred the whole thing and played it really nice and smooth. If you have heard the original Star Trek theme from the TV show, then it's all really nice and sort of ethereal, sort of space-like, isn't it? And it's sort of a choir sound, isn't it? And they're sliding between these notes, and it's really nice and smooth. You could also practice the piece in a more sort of proud, sort of military style to represent the sort of military nature of the sort of Starship Enterprise. So I'll just play you a first little bit of this piece. I'll play it with the metronome this time, but I'll play it with more of a military, tongue everything, make it slightly more proud sounding. So again, both ways of playing this piece are equally valid. If you wanted a more flowing vocal sound, then slur everything. If you wanted it to be sort of more military sounding, then you can tongue everything. But again, both versions, they're still perfectly in time with the metronome. The rhythms and everything is really nice and accurate. That's the bridge between grade 4 and grade 5 covered. I hope you've got some top tips on how to play these pieces. As you've probably realised, that the style of the pieces is becoming much more important, isn't it? So whether you're following exactly what it says on the music, which for most pieces that's what you need to do, especially if it's a band or an ensemble piece, but when you are choosing to differ slightly from the written music, you've got to do it with a reason. So as long as you make any changes but you've got a really good reason why and it makes sense musically, you can put your own spin on the pieces. So I hope you've enjoyed the video and I'll see you soon.